And we're back with the pursuit of ownership. I am doing this intro solo today. Peyton's had a pretty busy week. So I am introducing part one of a two-part series with the one and only Loren Israelsen. I was really excited about this one. You know, we've been having people back on sometime after their first interview on our segment. And this was one that I was pretty excited about getting an update on. And I got to tell you, it went a little bit different than I expected. Mostly because I figured we'd be spending a lot of time on talking about, growth strategies and, all the sort of progress that Loren has made, because Loren is just one of those people that busted right out of the gate of school and acquired many practices and just, became one of those notable people that people refer to whenever they talk about multiple practice or early ownership. But you'll see in the interview that what came of it really was more conversations about leadership and this sort of mindset that can go along with it. And, really what represents the fabric of group practice ownership. And I think that, it becomes pretty obvious that the thing that he focuses on the most is really his leadership and his culture within his practice. And that's something that, we're really big on here at Shared Practices. And I heard so many echoes of our own culture being reciprocated in what he does with his practices. So I think it's a really great interview. I hope you guys enjoy it, and you'll be hearing about it for the next couple of weeks. So enjoy without further ado. And we are back with another exciting episode of The Pursuit of Ownership. We have a time-honored friend of the show who has been oft-requested and oft-asked about, somebody that really doesn't need any introduction, but I'm doing it anyway. We have Loren Israelsen back on the show, large and in charge, ready to kind of catch us up on his story. The last time we had him on was now about a year ago, I think. I was saying 6 months, but I think it actually is more like a year. It's crazy to think it's been that long, but a lot has happened since then, and we wanted to have him back on and just kind of have him catch us up on some things and, bring us some new cautionary tales and humble bragging. So, Loren, thanks for being on, man. I really, really appreciate you coming back on, and I'm super excited to hear what's been going on with you.
Yeah, good to speak with you again, Tyler, and meet you for the first time, Peyton. I'm excited to be on the podcast with you guys.
Absolutely, same to you.
I
guess it's been, like Tyler said, it's been about a year now. I know this is super generic, but what's new in your world?
Yeah, well, we went through a year that we all know is 2020, and it was a pretty crazy year, but a lot of fun. I was just actually chatting with my business partner today about everything that we learned during 2020, and we learned a lot. It was a great year. Our practices were able to bounce back just fine, and purchased 5 or 6 more practices in the last year since we spoke, just continuing to grow and loving it, working with great people, and it's been an interesting but fun year.
Very cool. So what does that bring the grand total of practices to approximately, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, we have 7 locations. So we did a few mergers and then a few additional locations.
Yeah, man, that is awesome. People ask about you all the time because there's a lot of listeners of Share Practices, students especially, that will come out and they're saying, I want to pull Loren Israelsen. I want to own a bunch of practices out of school. And I'm sure they're all familiar with your episodes and stuff. And it seems like you're still, going along at a pretty steady clip here and, just making a pretty legendary story, I think. So, you mentioned that you have a partner that you're working with right now, and how has that kind of been going along for you? You guys pretty much tracking along trajectory you sort of expected, or did 2020 kind of throw things for a loop? How was that?
We, my goal is always double of what ends up happening, but I think that's just an important part of making goals, is to push it really high, right? And so, I'm happy with how things went in 2020 with the number of acquisitions and where we're at. And, so it's been, we're kind of tracking right on where I've been hoping and thinking that we'd be at right now. So things are good. My business partner and I, I don't know if, I talked to you about him in the last episode when we chatted, but one thing that I've been asked a lot about when students talk to me about doing something like this, a huge part of it is your business partners. like a massive part of it. Do you guys know anything about traction, level 10 meetings, all that?
Absolutely.
We had one today in a lesser sense. So Share Praxis is actually a pretty big proponent of traction. We don't talk about it a lot on the school, on the podcast. But that's pretty much how we run our quarterly meetings. And then that's pretty much how we style all the monthly meetings we have. We have tons of different departments now, and we meet frequently. We were actually on just a few hours ago doing something pretty similar. So yeah, it's safe to say that we've heard of it.
Yeah, the what's the book called? I think is it Rocket Fuel?
Rocket Fuel. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you haven't read Rocket Fuel, there's that one, and then there's another one by the same author, and in regards to visionaries and integrators and how all that works. But if you want to build a group, if you want to be able to build multiple offices, you really have to find somebody that's going to be synergistic to you, right? Not exactly the same personality, but read Rocket Fuel and learn more about what a visionary is and what an integrator is. And it's not that one's more important than the other, or one is above the other. You just have to have somebody that is so much in your vein of thought, but also synergistic that can take on that opposite role that you are. So if you're an integrator, you need to find somebody that's a visionary. If you're a visionary, you got to find somebody that's an integrator. And that's been a huge part of my success thus far, I think. And I would recommend if you're really interested in building a group, that you look deeply into that part of it, because I definitely wouldn't be where I'm at without my business partner.
And so where does that put you on that binary spectrum?
He's definitely more of an integrator than I am.
I probably could have guessed, but
I'm not very good at follow through, and I'm not very good at thinking through some of the implications of some of my plans.
I see.
So
the ideas are there, though.
The ideas are there, and I'm gonna push really hard. And he has ideas, and I push hard on his ideas. When I have ideas, he pushes hard on my ideas, and anyhow, the synergy of a partnership is super important to how well a group or any business venture can go.
Yeah. So my mind is blanking a little bit on how much we went into your partnership the last time we talked. Is that something that's happened fairly recently, or you had a partner this whole time?
So he came on probably a month or two after I started, after graduation, and then he's become a partner during that time in the last couple of years. So it wasn't initially, but I recruited him, went to high school and college with him, and we worked together in a business, door-to-door sales business. We worked together in that business for 4 or 5 years before I went to dental school. So I had a lot of history and knew a lot about him and trusted him a lot, and then was able to recruit him out here and started working together.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a good history for sure. So did you guys sort of know along that way while you were doing door-to-door sales, or when you were in high school or whatever, did you guys kind of know that you were one of those sort of visionary integrator pairs? I mean, you probably weren't like super aware of traction this whole time, but like, did you guys kind of know that you had that sort of chemistry, or is that something that evolved over time?
Not at all. I'll be honest. It was actually blind luck and chance that it worked out that way. When we started implementing traction about 1.5 years ago now, 1.5 years or almost 2 years, and we read Rocket Fuel, we were just both like, well, this is pretty crazy. We both just happen to fit well into these roles, and it helped to read that, and then to start getting traction coaching and working with a coach that could help us kind of embrace those roles, and start to just dig into those roles a little more firmly and figure out, okay, how do I maximize my output? How does he maximize his output? So yeah, it was pretty much blind luck. that it just happened that way.
Yeah, it's really an amazing thing. So shared practices, to give people some backstories, and I'm sure George has talked about this on the show before, but it was about last January, I think, that we had our first formalized quote unquote traction meeting, and this was held literally in George's kitchen. And we were just kind of sitting at the table, and to be honest, at first it felt like this very sterile, clinical, formulaic thing. And I think it was kind of difficult for us to embrace at first. But since then we've had several of those, and it is absolutely, I mean, this has unquestionably been our best year. The amount of growth that we've had, the amount of people that we brought onto the team, Payton being one of them, included, that actually happened that week. What that has really brought to the table, I think that's really changed things from just being a bunch of guys that were working together to an actual boardroom at times, and really having, evolving into a mature business that actually functions like one and feels like one whenever we get together. And so for anyone out there that has not, read Traction or Rocket Fuel or what have you, and you have, entrepreneurial aspirations, as many Share Practices listeners surely do, highly recommend those books. Payton, I think you read those too, right?
Yeah, they're both very high quality books, and it's kind of cool how they complement one each other. If you just read one or just read the other, you get a really good information from both, but they really do a good job of complementing each other. So yeah, fantastic recommendations.
Yeah, and I think one thing that it does so well is it really delineates roles, and you start to see, I think. So Loren, you can probably relate to this with your partner. So what I saw from Matt and George's chemistry is that they sort of, there is some overlap. No one's necessarily purely integrator or purely visionary necessarily. Everyone has a little bit of both, but there's one that they really more naturally sit in. And so before this really came about, they just sort of acted out however they felt at a given time. One would try to solve a problem or do that sort of follow through integrator type thing, but then they would try and do something visionary. And so it was just this very weird coagulated mess of, the two of them trying to play the same role. And after they sort of delineated, who they were in this pair, all of a sudden it was oh, I don't do that, you do that. And then, this is my job. And it was just very clear, what the two were actually supposed to be doing. And that sort of dynamic is actually kind of recapitulated itself throughout our whole team. There's even Payton and I have a bit of a visionary integrator pair, I think, sometimes in some of the things that we do, and we have our own little chemistry with how we work together. So that's been absolutely massive for sure. So is that kind of what you've experienced, Loren, or is there anything else about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if we want to take a tangent, well, first of all, this is a great infomercial. Sure. This is a great infomercial for Traction.
Yeah, we're not sponsored. We need to be. We need to work on that. Yeah, we should be.
We need to get a sponsorship going here. But to kind of take a tangent off of that, I mean, the way that you work with people. So not just Traction, reading Traction, reading Rocket Fuel, and figuring out what type of a person am I? How do I interact with other people? But also reading other books that are that help you figure out where you are on the spectrum of leadership, of a driver, of an entrepreneur, a caregiver, wherever you are in terms of your personality. I'm realizing more and more how important that is in figuring out how to communicate with other people, right? And it's huge. The way that, so if we really just kind of take a tangent off of this, and I know we don't necessarily have a direction we're going with the podcast, but personalities and how you interact with people are, I think, the next big thing that is going to make or break your success as a business leader. You have to be a leader, and in order to be a leader, you have to know who you are, and you have to know who the people around you are, and you have to figure out those synergies. Like Tyler, as you're saying, you and Payton, you guys have figured out a synergy, how you work well together, how you communicate well together. Can you guys call each other out and make something happen if things aren't working well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have to. Yeah.
You have to figure out a way to be to be vulnerable and be honest and have complete open communication, or else partnerships are going to fall apart, and jobs are going to fall apart in terms of like people working with you or for you, or people you're working for. Like, if you can't have open communication, if you can't have leadership and know who you are and know who the people around you are, stuff falls apart. And so I think that's a huge part. What books have you guys read in terms of leadership and personality, and what have you guys found in your journey and in your journey with shared practices and otherwise that have helped you in those areas?
Payton. Yeah, absolutely. There's one in particular that comes to mind. It's called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And it really just kind of goes to that same point that you were talking about just a couple minutes ago, where, you can talk to someone and you can, throw words at someone, whatever it might be. But if you don't establish that connection with them, if they don't feel like you're listening to them, or the person doesn't feel like you're taking what they have to say and actually listening to it, then they're probably not going to be very receptive to you. And, that goes back to, getting to know people, figuring out what's important to them. So yeah, it's a lot of the same, but it just goes to show how important it is. People need to feel like they're being listened to and that they have a say in the workplace. And I feel like that's a lot of what you focus on in your practice and your company as well.
Yeah, you really do. And when I was in dental school, and I listened to thousands of hours of podcasts, and I'll be honest, I really thought that a lot of the HR stuff was, I don't know the right word, but just it's like, that culture, all that, it sounds good.
It sounds like fluff and
it's
hokey.
Fluff. It's but it really is super important. And your ability to connect with people, your ability to, forge relationships with the people you're working with.
Yeah.
And not just, so I was talking to an associate a couple weeks ago that is not working with me, but she's working in another office, and we were talking about leadership and how the first few years of her career have been different than the last couple of years. And she said she realized after the first couple of years that there's a line that has to be drawn between being friends with your teammates, the assistants, hygienist, front desk, and being a leader.
Yeah.
So otherwise they don't really take you seriously. They're, everybody's here having fun together. And she said, you that's super important that you're having fun and all that, but they need to see you as a leader. They need to see you as basically the leader of the office. Even if you're an associate, they need to know and believe and trust in your diagnosis, your treatment plans, and know that, when you're not producing as a doctor, as an associate, you're not eating, right? And so you need to be a leader and push them, and you need to help them understand that they, we're not here sitting around and just wasting time. We're here to push and work and work hard together. But at the same time, you can be a friend.
Yeah,
you can be a friend of the team. The book, Servant Leader, leaders eat last. Those are super important principles that you need to be able to serve your team and help them know that you love them, but you also are a leader. Whether you're an associate or whether you're buying your first practice or your second practice, or you've got multiple practices, they need to know that you love them and you care for them,
right?
And but that also that you expect a lot of them.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, you bring up a wonderful point. So, I mean, I can really see how tenuous the balance is between, conversations where you need to be the leader versus conversations where you need to be a friend. And I don't know if those two are always in contrapose or not. So, like, as a I don't know if it makes any different for you being a multiple practice owner, or if you're, when you're working with a team that you're in the practice with, how do you know which moments are the time for you to be sort of authoritative and having higher expectations versus ones where you can sort of be more relaxed? Like, is it something you do at the same time? Is it something you sort of alternate between? Like, how do you know the difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, it's something I'm still figuring out, right?
Yeah.
But the thing I've realized most is that if expectations are set ahead of time, then it's easy to know where the line is and what should be happening, right? So if the expectation in the job interview is that, hey, this is a chill, laid back, we're all just great friends all the time, that's the expectation in the interview, then it's kind of hard to go back on that, right?
Right.
But if the expectation in the job interview is, hey, we work hard and we love each other and we hang out and it's fun, but we work really hard, then it's easier to have that conversation that, hey, this is my expectation of you guys. These things aren't going like they should. Or, hey guys, it's COVID year. Things are going to be slow in October and November, and we need to buckle down and get going, right?
Right.
Like I love and appreciate you guys, but I'm not calling you out. I'm not getting mad at you. This is where we need to be. This is where we need to be going. This is what's happening right now. And I'll be honest, I'm not perfect at it. I'm not great at it. I need to figure out how to connect with teams and with people better. And so, but it's a never stopping process.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, learning how to set appropriate expectations. I mean, this is something that comes up for me. I mean, I don't exactly manage a huge team just yet, but it definitely comes up in, managing my patients, right? Like trying to set the right expectations for them and what they can expect from me, from care at the school, which that's a good bit of legwork to get them prepared for that. But I think you make a wonderful point, because like it's like you mentioned, if you sort of present things and as like a laid back, chill environment as a means of maybe bringing their guard down or making them feel more comfortable in an interview or something like that, and then you take them on, and then they're sort of acting like it's a chill, laid back environment. There's no real incentive or goals, or no real need to buckle up your boots and do your thing. Like, I think that really that's kind of your fault for setting the wrong expectation off of what you actually wanted, right? So I think a lot of that comes back to just that sort of like extreme ownership idea of it really sort of being your fault for not really setting the right precedent and not preparing someone for what was really expected of them. And that comes up so much in my own leadership and my own ability to, work with people and my friendships. That is something that I'm reminded of all the time, is like, what expectation did I really set for the outcome that I might be upset with? So yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I mean, yeah, I think that you can, work the rest of your career trying to figure out exactly how you are that sort of amicable professional relationship, personified. Like, that's a difficult thing to really harness. So yeah, I mean, I can imagine that's extremely challenging. And so I imagine that. So, okay. So one thing, this is a bit of a pivot. So one thing that we talk about a lot, or recently been talking a lot about on Share Practices, is culture, right? And we talk about, manifesting culture within a practice. And one thing that George has talked about recently too is, he had manifested this wonderful culture in his practice. And that was when he was working in it frequently. Now he's really not so much at all, and he's sort of had to re-engineer and reverse engineer that so that it can be reproduced without him being there, right? So how have you sort of experienced sort of manifesting a culture that you're present in versus one that you're not? Because I know you're still working within at least one of the practices, right, or multiple.
Yeah, I work out of a couple of them.
Okay, but not all of them, right? Obviously, there's too many.
Correct.
Not enough days in the week anymore, right? So how have you sort of, recreated that culture? Like, how do you make that a similar thing at different locations? How do you scale that, so to speak?
Yeah, that is a great question that I don't have the answer for, because we're still working on it. That's a never ending process.
Right.
A big part of it is developing the culture with the doctors and the office manager, and helping train them on how to carry that culture into the practice.
Yeah.
And so if they can, I mean, a lot of it's a lot of training with the doctors and a lot of, one-on-one coaching, just chatting on the phone, making sure, number one, making sure you're on the same page with the doctor before you hire them, right? Are they the type of doctor that's going to be good for the culture, that's going to fit in the culture of what you're looking for? That's the first thing. And then number two is the office manager, trainings with them, making sure that they are personifying the culture, or make sure they understand what the core values are. How do they carry that out in the practices? So we have 4 core values, and we are currently working on the office managers during morning huddle, highlighting one of those core values each week. So every week they're doing one core value, and have the team talk about, hey, how team member A was, well, let me back up. So we can cut that part out. So currently we're having the office managers work on taking those core values and spreading it to the team each week, 1 week for each core value. And then during that week, during morning huddle, hey, how did team member A personify, love your people? And then the next week, have everybody try to recognize each other, and recognize each other in a way that, they see that this person personified the core values of the company.
I see.
How did we make the patient first this week? How did this team member do X, Y, and Z? And then we have a Slack channel as well that we call shout outs and reviews. So for each office, they have a shout outs and review, and we'll post really awesome Google reviews on there that the team members got. Nice. Or the team members will just post something that they saw other team members do. So there's a lot that you can do to scale culture, but it's definitely not a quick scale. Like you gotta work on it. You gotta be able to personify that culture yourself and be able to train on that culture for sure.
Yeah. I absolutely love that Slack channel idea with the reviews. That's awesome. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. So we just have the regular Slack channels for like general announcements and updates, and clinical Slack channel, insurance Slack channel, all that. But yeah, so then if you can have a way for the team to be able to lift each other up, it brings them together more, and it helps them helps each other to see how you are a team, and that's really what culture is.
Yeah. So is that something that you are, like, in the Slack? Are you tying that between all of the practices? Like, do all the teams at the different practices know each other? And is there like a sort of a enterprise level, community, or is it sort of like every practice sort of operates in its own pod?
They generally operate in their own pod.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we need team members to be working at another office, they'll get to know each other at the other offices. But generally it's their own kind of office environment. And each office is branded separately. Each office does have their own culture, right? Like it's I think personally it's good to have an overarching culture that is just non-negotiables, right? Like patients first, and love your people. Although the most important things, but then each office is going to have a slightly different culture depending on the people, depending on the patient base, depending on the location. So yeah, they're different in different ways.
All right. So that wraps up part 1 of our second series with Loren Israelsen. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. Again, this was a really cool interview where Loren got pretty, detailed about sort of what makes up him, the leadership of his group, being himself and his partner, and, how that really came about. And I hope that sort of foments some inspiration for people that are considering doing what he did, and helps people understand, what it really takes to get something like this off the ground. And what sort of partnerships are really important, and the qualities that, different roles have to have, be you a visionary or an integrator or what have you. I thought that was just really cool because that's just something that, we go into a lot in our leadership and our meetings and such. And so, hearing that sort of validated by him and specifically the dental space and not necessarily the podcast space was really interesting, and tons of other tidbits to go along with that. So again, hope you guys really enjoyed this. This is the end of our part 1, and you'll be hearing from him next week with tons more pearls about leadership and culture. See ya.